Melissa Barackman.
And I'm Cliff Barackman. And we made the North American Bigfoot Center.
Welcome to I Made This from Do Anything Media, a show about passionate people executing their big ideas in realistic ways you can learn from to make your own big idea a reality. I'm Bill Meeks, and I hope everybody out there had a great holiday. I know I did. We traveled to New York City for Christmas time, and I got a chance to go see former I Made This guest Connor Ratliff perform with his team, the Stepfathers, at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater there in New York, Hell's Kitchen. It was really cool to get to meet Connor. Plus, I got to see Gotham's Ben McKenzie in his show Grand Horizons on Broadway, which was really, really cool. It had just opened, too, just a couple days prior. Anyway, glad to be back. And today I'm talking with Cliff and Melissa Barackman, who run the North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon. You might know Cliff from the Animal Planet series Finding Bigfoot, and I personally know Melissa from casting her as a host and dancer for client videos back in my freelancing days. Now, Cliff has been a dedicated Sasquatch field researcher for more than 2 decades, and he brings all that experience to the North American Bigfoot Center. His wife Melissa is also really good at making horrific replicas and props, skills she's been able to put into use working at the museum. Now, I know people are usually pretty skeptical about Bigfoot, and we tackle that head on. And Cliff also tells us about some people whose Bigfoot theories are a little much, even for him. Okay, I made this for you. Take a listen. All right, thank you guys so much for joining me today. How are you doing out there?
Yeah, just another day out adventuring or at work, you know?
You guys have wintry kind of weather there, right? I'm in Florida, so I get none of it. So I'm looking forward to hearing stories about snow if you have any.
No snow yet this year. I mean, there's snow at higher elevations, but we live at about 750 feet, and the snow, I think, right now is starting about 1,500 feet. It's just been raining like cats and dogs, though, today.
That happens in Florida, too. We call it the 3 p.m. apocalypse, where it just rains like crazy for about 45 minutes, and then it's clear the rest of the day, but muggy.
Yeah, we call it Oregon.
Let's go ahead and get started here, and we'll start with you, Cliff. Why don't you tell me how you got interested in Bigfoot?
Well, as long as I can remember, even as a little boy, I loved monsters, you know, and I grew up in kind of a golden age of Bigfoot schlockumentary sort of stuff, you know, with In Search Of and Legend of Boggy Creek and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, back when I was a little boy, Bigfoot was just another monster like Frankenstein or Dracula, you know. Mm-hmm. And I've always been kind of a weird guy in general, so I've had these interests in strange fringe subjects. But when I was in college, I ran across a book that kind of outlined a lot of the scientific work that had been done on Sasquatches. And it kind of was just driven home to me. It's like, holy crap, not only are these like quirky and weird, but they're probably real. And so I started camping in places. I'd already camping anyway, but I started camping in places where Bigfoots have been seen and, you know, getting my toes wet, so to speak, in the pool of Bigfoot field research. Mm-hmm. Like I'm an amateur scientist, you know, I have a scientific mind, and I've just kind of continued through the years. And then eventually I was publishing stuff on blogs, and then I ended up on Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot television show for 10 years. And
okay, well, let's get her prepped and get her on the air.
Yeah, let's send that up. Yeah.
The Everglades is a huge area. That is too large of an area for our team to cover, especially at night. So we called in drone specialists so we can take photographs from the air of what's going on right now in the environment. If we can find out where the animals are moving around, perhaps we can find where the Sasquatches also are right now.
Okay, clear to launch.
now I've opened a museum on the subject, and yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but you know, life is a weird adventure, and then you die. So.
You were a host on Finding Bigfoot for a while. How did you find that, you know, being sort of a reality show talent for 10 years?
It's challenging in its own ways because real serious Bigfoot investigation doesn't go well with television, honestly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at the end of the day, you know, Bigfoot investigation stuff, especially field work, is fairly boring. You know, sitting around for long periods of time, or, you know, in a tree stand like a lot of hunters recommend, or walking in the woods, and the night op stuff, you know, it doesn't go well with cameras and lights, because really without a camera or light, you don't have a TV show, and you need to have that. So television is a very difficult medium to navigate when you're trying to do real Bigfoot stuff. But at the same time, we managed it, because there's a couple ways to approach field work, besides just the investigation of things that have already happened. Like if you're trying to encounter a Sasquatch, you could do the stealth mode. That's really, really boring and makes bad TV. Or you could go in, being ridiculous and loud and drawing attention to yourself, because if Sasquatches have a weakness, it's their intelligence - curiosity. They just might come around to check out, like, what the heck is going on in my woods, So that's what we basically did. That was our intent, to go and make some noises and try to see if we can grab something's attention. Then, it works sometimes. And most of the time it didn't, because that's what Bigfooting is. You go 100 times and, at random, and you might get 3 or 4 things. But those 3 or 4 things keep you coming back for more.
Oh, yeah. Now, I was, doing a little exploration online about you before we talked today. And I noticed you took Bob Saget out once. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, Bob Saget did a TV show back in the day. I think it was called Strange Days. It only ran for 1 season, where Mr. Saget would put himself into different cultures and really immerse himself. And he wanted to do a Bigfoot trip.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch. The clinical name is Bipedicus giganticus. My eyes are up here.
My friends were really featured heavily on the show. Bobo, James Fay Bobo, who was also my colleague on Finding Bigfoot, and another good friend of mine named Craig Flippy. They were really the stars of that. I mean, I was just kind of along for the ride, and I got, I cast Bob's footprint, and, there's B-roll sort of section stuff on, or special feature stuff online where I'm talking to Bob about various vocalizations and stuff. But yeah, it was kind of an event where a lot of my friends, they said, hey, this is happening. Why don't you come on up? So I did. And I got to meet the guy, and he's not nearly as weird and raunchy and everything as the rest of his acts are.
I was about to ask that, like, was he in, Bob Saget mode, or like Danny Tanner Bob Saget mode?
Somewhere in between. I mean, he wasn't exactly raunchy, but he also it wasn't rated G either. He was doing his own comedy show. So throw out as many jokes as possible and let the editors sort them out.
Okay, so we'll set the stage here. You're doing this reality show stuff about Bigfoot. When does Melissa enter the picture?
Like what, season 6 or something? I don't know. Yeah, like one day she knew one of the other cast members, and she got a job as a production assistant on the show. And I remember the first day she showed up, and I go, who's that? I want to talk to her. and I eventually did, and we got married. It wasn't quite that fast nor easy, but that's kind of the shortest version of the story you can say.
Very nice. Well, me and Melissa go back a while, and I'll go ahead and address this too. I used to actually use Melissa as a host / actress for a bunch of these really lame freelancing videos I did way back in the day. You remember that, Melissa?
I totally remember doing a lot of yoga poses.
Oh yeah, it was for an Australian gym, and they wanted like a series of videos to play on their TV monitors in the gym. So we had Melissa come over, and you did like hip hop dance and yoga, a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, my husband would have laughed.
Yeah, I have those still. I'd love to see those.
They should be laying around somewhere. I'll make a note of it. I'll try and send them over to you after we're done here today.
Yeah, maybe we can use it for our behind-the-scenes Patreon accounts for the museum or something.
When my wife and I were getting ready to move, things were, well...
busy. Luckily, my friend Marissa had recently moved, and she told me about this great website called movinggood.com. We had no idea it could be this easy to move.
So we have the reality TV, and then you meet Melissa. When do you guys decide that you want to build the North American Bigfoot Center?
I think once we learned that the show was done, we kind of just enjoyed each other for a while, because we had been dating long distance for a while and, kind of been busy, and TV's very relentless and crazy schedules. So we kind of just enjoyed living, and we bought a house, and, just to really know what we were going to do next. We kind of put it out there that a museum would have been a great idea, but didn't really have a plan in place, So it just kind of fell on our laps, really. Cliff has the second largest cast collection in the world, other than Jeff Meldrum. We have a lot of evidence sitting around the house. And we both thought, what better way than have a center based on physical evidence, provide a safe space for people to come and talk Squatch.
Were you guys already living there, or did you select the location you have for a specific reason?
Well, we were living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and I've been trying to move out to the woods for forever, it seems, but for a long time. And then with my parents passed, and I got an inheritance, and I decided the most honorable use of my inheritance money would be to put that on a house, because I think my parents would be proud of me to do something, and that kind of keeps my parents around too,
Yeah.
So we did that. And so we live out in the woods outside of Sandy, Oregon, near a place where there's been a number of Sasquatch sighting reports. Because like most people, we chose the location of our property based on Sasquatch sighting reports. And we figured, okay, well, in the last couple of years since the show's been over, we've been making our living by basically me going and doing public appearances and speaking at conferences. And I guess I'm a pretty high demand public speaker in the Bigfoot circuits. But that takes me away from home, where Melissa is and our dog and our property. And I did like 20 or more jobs, 25 jobs this past year. And that's 4 or 5 days at a time away from home, and kind of adds up, and it's grueling and it's not that lucrative, so we're scratching a living by me being gone all the time. Kind of thought that, well, maybe there's a way to, if we're not going to make much money in general, maybe there's a way to not make much money closer to home. Yeah. And then a friend of mine, actually, a couple friends of mine, own similar museums in other parts of the country. Like Lauren Coleman owns the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine. And David and Melinda Becerra own Expedition Bigfoot out in Georgia, a great Bigfoot museum. And Mike Rugg owns a little shop down in Felton, California. And these other people have done this before. We're not the trailblazers here. We're kind of using them as a model, and then improving and changing things as we deem necessary to fit our personalities.
What do you think your differentiator is? The thing that sets you apart from those other museums?
Well, off the top of my head, I think my notoriety, due to the the TV exposure, of course, that sets us aside, because in a way, I'm part of the exhibits there.
He is.
Well, yeah, because people walk in, they go like, "I can't believe you're working here." I said, "Why not? It's our shop. Like, Melissa and I own this. Why shouldn't I work it? But I just thought you'd be somewhere." It's like, well, reality TV exists, so they don't have to pay you much money. I need a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think, not to interrupt you, but I also think what sets us apart is the fact that we take records of people's sightings, and they fill out a form, they mark it on a map. We take them seriously, and we're trying to get a record of Sasquatch activity in Clackamas County where we are. And I don't know they're not doing that, the other people, but we're seriously investigating and interested in people's accounts who are local.
Well, yeah, and also we're the only one in Oregon and Washington. There's a very small one in Willow Creek, California. There's another very small one, or museum. There's a very small museum in Willow Creek, California, that houses the Bob Titmus footprint track collection. And then there's another very small sort of house-like museum down in Felton outside of Santa Cruz. But we're the only ones in Oregon and Washington, and this is prime Sasquatch habitat. And Portland goes around flaunting things like keep Portland weird. Oh yeah, well, where's your Bigfoot museum? How weird can you really profess to be without one of those, Mr. and Mrs. Portlanders? So I decided to step in with Melissa and set the record straight. Yeah,
they just have their fixies and they think that's enough. That's not nearly enough. Not nearly enough to keep it weird.
Exactly. Yeah, as weird as possible.
So you said that you get reports of sightings from your locality there. Do you guys ever use that information to go out and investigate or try and triangulate where a Bigfoot might be?
Oh, yeah. Because, at this point, collecting sighting reports, that's been done for 50 years. Mm-hmm. We're not going to learn a whole lot more from them as far as the species goes. Sure, there's going to be surprises here and there, don't get me wrong. But the real value from sighting reports is the where and when it happened. Mm-hmm. Because if you can figure out where and when these things are, where and when these Sasquatches are in a certain area, then maybe you can figure out why they're there. And then that might help you predict their movements in the future. Because we're really way past the point of if they're real at this point. We're no longer trying to solve that. What we're trying to do is find out how they live, and use that information to predict their movements so we can possibly get footage or other evidence from them. Like, for example, there's a spot outside of Colton that's produced footprints or sightings in 2015, 2017, and 2018, all in November. But that's an interesting pattern. And I'm sure they're probably out there right now because it's not that much after November. I didn't hear anything this past year, but it's those sort of patterns that we gather from our sighting report data that helps me direct my field operations.
Do you think the Bigfoot creatures are just looking for like a good Thanksgiving meal every year, or why do you think they picked November?
I think that people are seeing them out in that particular area because it's a human factor. Because November is deer hunting season.
Oh,
yeah, and I think that Colton is a very wild area. There's some wilderness stretches in there, maybe not officially designated wilderness stretches, but functionally wilderness. And I think that people go out to that area because there's deer and elk in that area. And these reports have all come from hunters. So I think that it's a place that's close to, I can't really call it town because Colton is a tiny little town, but I mean, it's not like a city center like Portland or something like that, but it's close to where a lot of these folks live, and it's a wild area with a lot of game. So I think that's why the reports come from that area at that time of year.
Gotcha. So, and you kind of alluded to it a couple minutes ago. There's a healthy amount of skepticism around the concept of Bigfoot. So I wanted to know from each of you, when did you start to think that, Bigfoot was put away your skepticism and sort of embrace the reality of Bigfoot?
Well, yours is earlier than mine, so.
Yeah, I'll go first, just chronologically. I think it's when I became aware of the evidence. I find that skeptics are the least informed on the subject. They think that, well, why don't people see them more? So, well, they see them all the time. Like, how come this happened? Where are the bones? They talk about all these questions, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, just ill-informed. But the skeptics are not very well informed on the subject. They're not aware of the work that's been done. They're not aware of the evidence that's been collected and the congruency of that evidence and what it points to. I knew these things were real based on the evidence long before I saw one. So you don't need to see something to believe it. Have you ever seen an atom? I doubt it, but you think they're real because that's the model that seems to be true. Most people have never seen mountain lions, but they think they're real. I don't know. So I knew they were real back, actually, when I first discovered that book, and I started reading about the scientific work that's been done on the subject by anthropologists, both cultural and physical anthropologists. Skeptics have a lot of explaining to do. Like, if these things aren't real, then how and why do every native group in North America that lives in suitable habitat, how could it be that they all have an animal that fits this description of a giant hair-covered human-like thing living out in the woods? The tribes in Florida didn't talk to the tribes in British Columbia, but yet they have the same description, including behavioral descriptions that we now realize today are Sasquatch behaviors in their oral tradition. Again, just looking at the evidence will bring you to the conclusion that maybe you won't be completely convinced that they're real, but to be aware of the breadth of evidence and the congruency therein, it should open your mind. If you still have a closed mind that these things do not exist because they cannot exist, then maybe you're not a good reader. I don't know.
Do you guys get many people coming into the museum who are skeptical, or is there pretty much people who are kind of already on your side?
I think it's a mix. I think there's probably more. I think there's more believers in my experience anyway when I'm in there. I mean, there are skeptics, but I think that the believers outnumber them.
Yeah, and believing's a tough thing because believing implies that you think it's real despite a lack of evidence. You know what I mean? Like that's for religion and politics. I believe this is real because I believe it, but in the absence of evidence, I should say. But the evidence is there. And then, of course, most people need to have a subjective experience, like a personal experience, which is, I think, how Melissa here came around the corner and decided that they were real.
Yeah, before the show, I was more of a paranormal person. I did ghost hunts. I'd take folks out to the woods and go to a cemetery.
I think I remember you asking me to come out with you one time, but scheduling was weird or something.
Oh, yeah, it's so fun. You should have totally come. But I brought my meters and my cameras and my recorders, and I did all that sort of thing. But Bigfoot really wasn't on my radar so much. And then when I got the job, and I was on the road with these guys going to different states and just listening to the witnesses and actually being there, instead of watching it on my TV, but actually hearing them and seeing them and how scared they were to tell their stories. And then in night investigations, hearing wood knocks or, I think I was in Turner, Maine when I had my first experience, I think, was a Bigfoot, and it was terrifying. And I started thinking there might be something to this. And then as I learned and listened to other people, I just, gathered all the information to decide that, I do definitely believe in them. So
Yeti, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, call it what you want, but it's an interesting thing to talk about.
Just off Highway 26.
Some ways it's eye-opening.
In Boring on the way to Mount Hood.
We are here. We are open from now on.
Masks, maps, castings, and yes, a life-size Bigfoot fill a new museum dedicated to all things about the elusive creature.
This is an audio podcast, so I can't exactly roll footage or show photos or something. So why don't you guys describe for our listeners what the experience is like when they come to the North American Bigfoot Center?
Well, when you come in the door, you find yourself in the gift store - information center. Yeah, it's a gift store. We have a bunch of Bigfooty sort of gifts and shirts and toys and, all that sort of stuff. Everything you'd imagine a gift store in a museum would have. Footprint casts, we have those for sale. There's just a tremendous number of Bigfoot related merchandise items. Mm-hmm. But it's also the information center. And I think that's actually equally important for us, at least, because we're trying to be an educational institution in a way. I was an elementary school teacher before I ended up on television. So I'm trying to continue my educational career, but about this subject. Mm-hmm. And on the walls inside the information center, there's movie posters and there's stuff that kind of anchor the visitor in his or her experience with Bigfoot, because most people have experienced it through the media in one form or another. But there's also footprint casts on the wall, and with background information on each one of the footprint casts. About this particular police officer cast this, and these are the circumstances that led that police officer on this investigation and what he found. Or this particular cast has mysteries associated with it, and that sort of stuff. Some background information. We also have some general educational posters, like for example, there's one on cryptozoology. Mm-hmm. Which is a fancy word for the study of animals that have not yet been discovered but might be real. And a tremendous number of animals fall into that category besides just Sasquatches. And like the coelacanth fish is an excellent example. It's a fish that we know exists, but we thought was extinct for 20-something million years. We knew they were real from the fossil record. And then I think in the 1920s, this ichthyologist, this woman was down in off Madagascar in Africa. And she saw one of these things in a fish market. I said, what? And she what is that? And then, basically she rediscovered a species that all the local people said, yeah, we catch those all the time. We eat them. They're called this, or, and they have a local name for them. Mm-hmm. The bear is another great example. They finally got a pelt of that thing in the late 1800s and couldn't get another one for decades after that, because these things were so elusive, not only by their nature, but also where they live in the world and their rarity. Komodo dragons, mountain gorillas were discovered, I think, in 1902. The largest primate on the planet. Didn't know they existed until 1902. And throughout the 1990s in Vietnam, very large goat-like animals were discovered, deer and that sort of stuff, and cryptozoology. Mothman. Well, Mothman hasn't been discovered. That's just one of these things out there. Yeah, but and so we have some displays on other cryptids as well. But the real gem of the museum, of course, is in the back room, the display halls, the exhibit halls. That's where the vast majority of stuff is. We have a big life-size Sasquatch replica that looks very compelling, and a lot of the witnesses we work with who have had close encounters with Sasquatch, they all say that that's very close to what they remember seeing. Was that something that was prefab that you guys bought, or did you kind of build it up yourselves? Actually, going back to our Bigfoot, 7.5 feet tall, was sculpted by Bo Bruns out of Unit 70 Studios in, I think it's in Dayton? Columbus, Ohio. Yeah. So we want to give him a plug there too. He does great work. It looks like it's foam latex. It's relatively light. I mean, although you have a bit of trouble trying to get it out yourself, but it's pretty light. But the hair, the anatomy, the ratio of the arms and legs, the torso, everything is just on point. And we've had a couple of people who have seen it say that's exactly what I saw. Mm-hmm. And then that's how you know you got a good one. Melissa, you do, because, we follow each other on, Facebook and Instagram and stuff. Yeah. You do some weird sort of casting stuff. Like I remember seeing like weird, horrific finger pens or something like that. What's that all about? Oh, I love it. I love making severed fingers. Mm-hmm. My favorite thing to do. I did make a severed finger of a Bigfoot magnet for the shop. We do sell those. I just really
like to sculpt. And that's one thing too that he does a lot of the content of the museum, and he'll say, I want this sculpt of a Bigfoot, and I do those as well. So, or maybe a rock facade or something like that. So I actually make the fake rocks and the walls and all that.
That kind of leads me to my next question too, because I was wondering, as a married couple, how do you guys sort of divide the labor on this enterprise?
It's nice, actually, because generally speaking, like I would get there early. Melissa can hang back, and like make me lunch or something like that and bring it into work.
I do that.
And now we're closed on Tuesday, Wednesdays, but she started taking Mondays off, and I started taking Thursdays off. So we're kind of giving each other 3-day weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 of those days we can spend together. And then the other day we can go off and do whatever we need to do. Like I go to the woods or talk to witnesses, and I don't know what she does. She probably
make
makes
pottery,
fingers. Yeah, make fingers
all day long.
Yeah.
I know it's usually married couples don't really work together well, but I will say Cliff is a real fun person to work with. And even at night when we have dinner, I'm not sick of looking at his face. I love him. So it's a good partnership. It's easy.
Well, I'd say it sounds it. Yeah. And being in a married relationship, I could definitely see being at home with each other all the time, then being at work with each other all the time. It could probably get a little strained, but it sounds like you guys have it, locked down. So I've noticed, particularly in the past few weeks, actually, that you guys have been getting a lot of press about this place. So I was wondering, how are you sort of arranging that, and is it showing in the number of people coming? Like, are you seeing increased attendance?
Well, yes and no. I mean, a lot of people who come in and say they saw us on the news or whatever, or they read this article or that article. Really, most people are seeing us on television, though. A little disappointed in the amount of people read nowadays. I don't think they're reading articles like they used to, honestly. Mm-hmm. But that's just a critique on the larger society. But
that's Teacher Cliff.
Yeah, that's Teacher Cliff. Bitching about the way things are.
These kids don't read anymore. No.
Attendance is okay right now, which is actually great because at the end of the day, we're a new business. We only opened the doors in August, and this is also the slow season. It's not quite ski season yet, and summer is definitely over. And essentially, Bigfoot Museum, we're essentially part of the tourism industry. So the fact that we're having a steady, maybe not heavy, but a steady stream of visitors is a good sign for us, considering we're a brand new business and this is the slowest season of the year. Mm-hmm. So we're making rent. We're doing okay. We're pushing through. Things are wonderful, and we're optimistic about the future.
And I actually think word of mouth has been better for us, even.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people say, I heard about you from my cousin or my brother or whatever. And that's kind of, it's a small town, Boring, and the little communities surrounding it, and people talk. And it's so nice, people are recommending it to their friends and families, and we're really grateful for the support of the local communities.
Have you guys had any sort of fun or interesting visitors or surprising visitors to the center?
Yeah, certainly. Because believe it or not, there's a couple weird people in the Bigfoot community. And every once in a while, a couple of them roll through the door, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, I love weird things and weird people, and the weirder the better, I'd say. And everyone is welcome in the door at the Bigfoot Center, of course.
I will say, Cliff, with the weird thing, I completely agree with you. It's one of my favorite words to use in many, many contexts, and people always assume you're using it negatively. I'm like, no, weird is a positive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And obviously, I have my own thoughts about Sasquatches or whatever, what they are, or what they're not, and I don't have to agree with anybody to enjoy their company. So, I mean, for example, I don't think Bigfoots are paranormal at all. But lots of people do. And people are coming in the door and they say, yeah, this Bigfoot was telling me this, and through telepathy in my brain. And I just listen and go, all right, that's great, man. You have a much more exciting life than I do. I think that they're like bears or something that, not quite bears. I think they're actually hominins, which is a whole different story. Yeah, so a lot of interesting people do come through the doors with a lot of interesting stories.
Like, I'm kind of curious. What's sort of the rationale for the supernatural interpretation of them? Like, is it like some sort of like weird wood god or something like that they think Bigfoot is? Or
I think that people underestimate Sasquatches and probably overestimate themselves in some ways, and therefore they have to go to another unknown to explain this unknown. Like, oh, we would know about them by now, so there must be something extra special, like paranormal about them. They must be able to turn invisible because they'd be seen more often. They must, I don't know, any number of things. And then people are weird, and people have weird perceptions of their own reality. And I think they start attributing some of those things to Sasquatches. Doesn't make any sense to me. I think you should start with the most mundane explanation and move on from there if that model doesn't work well for the thing you're trying to describe. But, people just love a good mystery, and they're happy to compile all sorts of mysteries and start piling them on top of one another to explain them away.
Just out of curiosity, within the community, is there any sort of, I don't know, hoidiness or snobbery about like using the term Bigfoot versus Sasquatch?
No, not at all. Sasquatch actually is a term that was coined by J.W. Burns, who was this white guy on a native reservation, or First Peoples Reserve is actually the proper term, because it was up in Canada. And up in Canada, they prefer to be called First Nations people, and reservations are called reserves. So this guy, J.W. Burns, he was a teacher on the Chehalis Reserve outside of Harrison Hot Springs. And he started hearing stories about these giant hair-covered people that lived in the woods. And he started talking to witnesses who had seen these things. And the local tribal name for these things, these animals, can't be Englished very well. Like there are sounds in their language that there are no corresponding letters for. So he anglicized it and turned it into the word Sasquatch. And that word was born in the 1920s at some point. Then the word Bigfoot came about in about 1958 when the Jerry Crew, this guy, got the first still in existence Bigfoot casts and brought it to the news media. And then the word Bigfoot was born. So really, Bigfoot is from California and Sasquatch is from British Columbia, but they both describe the same animals.
Let's go ahead and circle back around to the business a little bit. What were some of the challenges you faced when trying to put the center together? Like, was there anything that if you had to do it over again, you'd do differently?
Of course. We have no idea how to build a business because we're he's an educator, Sasquatch enthusiast. I'm whatever I am, we don't really have the business thing. So I think we knew what we wanted. We knew what we wanted it to look like, but executing it was really hard.
We've learned a tremendous amount about how not to run a museum so far. And really, I'm a doer. I'm not a conceptual kind of guy. Because I was an elementary school teacher for 14 years, again, before TV grabbed me and I got put on the screen. So therefore, I have a couple superpowers because of my elementary school teaching background. And one of those superpowers is I can do anything with no resources. Because that's what teachers are expected to do day in, day out.
My wife's a teacher too, and I 1,000% agree.
Well, yeah. So we just kind of jumped in and muddled our way through it with the help of some great contractors and people who worked with us and graphic designers. And, we pulled in favors from friends and, and first, I don't know how, but we made it through the tunnel and now we're in business.
It's great that you guys have found a way to turn your passion into your job. A lot of people try and do that, and they can't just make it click. And it seems like you guys are really starting to make it click for yourselves, and that's always great to see.
Oh, thank you.
So what are your big plans for, say, the next year or so? To kind of build out the center more.
Well, right now we want to make better use of our space. I think that's probably the next challenge for us because we do have a fairly small space, 2,500 square feet or something. Mm-hmm. So now it's about using the space we have wisely. Like at first it was get the doors open, let's get rent paid, But now, now that we have this steady stream of people, we need to use the space we have more intelligently. And we can build out a little bit. Like we have these ideas of we have this long closet, for example, that we want to punch a hole in the wall and turn it into a Yeti cave. It's an underground little thing, for the kids and the kids inside the adults, mm-hmm. And maybe do some fossil sort of work inside there, fossil displays. We want to continue doing some special events, having guest speakers at the shop. I know Melissa really, really wants to do a Bigfoot themed haunt for next October because no one else up here doing that.
That's a very fun idea. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to be closed for 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks of October. No museum, just straight on haunt, because I just think that would be so cool. And it would bring in the haunt people, not so much the Bigfoot enthusiasts, but like a different section of, Portland. So
and then you can give them a pamphlet on the way out, and they can come back in November when Bigfoot's around anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have a lot of plans, and even setting up like a Patreon, because we've gotten a lot of interest on that online. Hey, is there a way I could be a member or what? So we're kind of looking to do that, after the new year as well. Try to figure out how to reach more people, even if they're not in this area. They could still feel like they're part of the NABC.
Yeah, Patreon's really great for that. We used it to fund our podcasting stuff for a number of years. And it's just great because not only do you get the cash money that you need to, put food to mouth and all that stuff, but you also get this really super engaged community who are big fans of everything you're doing. As you try and grow things and you want to move in different directions, you have this great sort of focus group you can run any idea past, and they're going to tell you what they think. And if you follow their advice, everyone who is already into your stuff is going to be right along for the ride. So good luck with that. Definitely. Have you guys thought about doing any sort of a YouTube channel or a podcast or something based around Bigfoot?
Well, I already do a podcast based around Bigfoot. It's called Bigfoot.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Bobo, who was one of my colleagues on Finding Bigfoot, he and I found ourselves talking every week anyway, and people kept asking, "Hey, where can I see you and Bobo do stuff?" And well, Bobo, why don't we just record this, and put it out? And this worked out really well. So Bobo and I do a weekly podcast called Bigfoot and Beyond with Cliff and Bobo. We get together, we talk about Bigfoot stuff that's going on right now, or what we've been doing in the field with Sasquatch. We have guests on, witnesses, and that sort of stuff. So, and Melissa and I have talked a lot about a YouTube channel for the museum where, we can let our quirky personalities shine through small advertisements or field work. And that, I imagine, we might be able to integrate that somehow with the Patreon account. And I don't know, that's a big world that I've only barely stuck my toe into at this point.
The first one I think should be watch Cliff eat a ghost pepper. Things like that. Just fun. Quirky.
Oh yeah, and those are definitely good to kind of build that connection further and further with your audience too. Guys, thank you again so much for joining me today. It's been a great talk, learning about the North American Bigfoot Center and everything you guys have been doing. And you guys are such a great team, which is always great to see. Why don't you let people know where they can find out some more information?
Okay, well, thank you. By the way, you've been a great host. So our website, you can find out information on there, is North American Bigfoot Center.com. We're on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, of course, Facebook. Did I miss any?
No, I think that's mostly it. Yeah, you can find us on all those sort of things. We try to post a couple times a week or more.
Yeah.
So follow us there, and that's a great way to learn about what we've been up to, new exhibits that are coming, new features that we're adding, special events that we might be hosting.
We're going to get our online store up and running. We're working on that right now.
Yeah, we're kind of slowly adding things to that. But yeah, I tried to deal with that a few weeks ago, and I disabled the entire inventory system, and it really screwed things up. So
it wasn't that bad.
It's a big learning curve for me, but I'm doing it.
Well, your expertise is in going out and hunting Bigfoot, not, setting up a Shopify account or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys one more question, and then we'll wrap it up here. Just because this is one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid, opinion on Harry and the Hendersons. It doesn't have to be big. Just I'm curious what you guys think about that movie.
The last scene's the best. The very, very last scene, in my opinion, is the best one, where they let Harry loose again, and all the 4 or 5 Bigfoots that were in the woods, and he didn't even see him until they moved. That's my opinion on it. And it's a little unnerving to see the guy who runs the Bigfoot Museum and realize that's probably me in 20 years.
Yeah, I got to say, the first time I saw it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Baker, one of my my gosh, one of the biggest influences of makeup and sculpting, Rick Baker, he did Harry and the Hendersons costume. He did all the effects on that film.
He won awards for it, I think.
He won awards, yes. And he was going to be at the live screening in Portland here at the Hollywood Theater. Mm-hmm. So Cliff and I ran down and got to meet Rick Baker and watch the movie. And I had to go to the bathroom and cry because it was so sad.
Yeah, she cried.
I cry. I do. I get emotional. But what a beautiful film. I love that so much. Love it.
Yeah, it's a great film. There was also not quite as great, but still pretty decent sitcom that they did too back in the 90s. If you can YouTube up some of those episodes, you might enjoy those too.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to let you get back to it. And if you can get me an interview with Bigfoot, I'd appreciate it. So just let me know on that, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, same goes for you, though. Let me pass on my number if you get it.
Oh, you know what? The second either of us run into Bigfoot conference call, we all three get on the line. It'll be perfect.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you have your own big idea you've made a reality, we want to hear about it. Let us know by emailing imadethis@doanything.media. We'd love to share your project, or maybe even talk to you about it. You can follow the show at imadethisshow, all one word, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Again, that's at imadethisshow. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or on our website, imadethis.doanything.media. Again, that's imadethis.doanything.media. And if you do subscribe, make sure you leave a review so we can shout you out on the show. I'm Bill Meeks. Thanks for listening.